This 4-year-old girl was hit with a rope every day, until a millionaire saw it and took justice into his own hands. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The whistle of the rope cutting the air made Cole Miller stop abruptly in front of the broken window. His eyes, accustomed to appraising luxury real estate, now witnessed a scene he never imagined finding in the quiet Meadows Creek subdivision in Springwood, Kansas. Through the cracked pane, he saw a small, frail girl, no older than 6, cowering in a corner of the living room, while a severe-looking woman raised a braided rope in the air. "If you don't finish these dishes today, you're going to bed without." "Supper again, Libby?" the harsh voice echoed through the simple house. Cole felt his blood boil. Memories of his own childhood, more than 4 decades ago, surged forward like a whirlwind. The yelling, the punishments, the sleepless nights. Without a second thought, he crossed the small, unkempt yard and knocked on the door forcefully. The woman who answered tried to slam the door shut as soon as she saw him, but Cole, his 52 years seasoned with determination, blocked it with his foot. "You must be Mildred," he said, keeping his voice controlled despite the fury consuming him. "I'm Cole Miller, and I was interested in buying properties in this area, but now my interest has completely changed." Mildred, 47, held the rope behind her back, as if that could erase what he had just witnessed. Her face, hardened by life in the country, showed a mix of defiance and fear. "You have nothing to do with what happens inside my house," she replied, lifting her chin. Little Libby watched the scene from the same corner where she had been, her large, frightened eyes fixed on Cole, as if trying to decide if he represented hope or another reason to be afraid. "You're mistaken," Cole replied, his voice now carrying authority. "When a child is being mistreated, everyone has something to do with it, and I'm not leaving here without ensuring this girl is safe." It was then that Libby did something unexpected. She slowly got up and walked to a small shoebox hidden under the worn sofa. From inside, she took out a small, shiny blue stone and clutched it against her chest. "That's none of your business!" Mildred lunged towards the girl, but Cole stepped between them. That's when he noticed the marks on Libby's small arms, some recent, others already scarred. "If you take one more step towards this child, I swear I'm going straight to the sheriff's department," Cole threatened, though he knew the situation was more complex than it appeared. In a small town like Springwood, personal connections often mattered more than the law. Mildred backed down, but her eyes flashed with rage. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I have legal guardianship of her. I'm the only family this girl has." It was then that Libby, still clutching the blue stone, spoke for the first time, her voice just a whisper. "My real mom is coming back." Those simple words caused an unexpected reaction in Mildred. Her face paled, and the rope slipped from her hands, falling to the floor with a dull thud. Cole realized there was much more to this story than a simple case of abuse. Mildred's reaction to the mention of the real mother, the barely disguised fear in her eyes, all pointed to a deeper mystery. "Libby," he called, crouching down to the girl's height, "do you want to come with me? I promise I'll keep you safe." Before Mildred could protest, Libby had already run to Cole, still holding her blue stone tightly. He picked her up, feeling how thin and fragile she was. "You'll regret this," Mildred hissed, her face contorted with hatred. "You don't know what you're doing. Powerful people are involved in this." Cole walked out of the house carrying Libby, ignoring Mildred's threats. As he walked towards his imported car, parked on the dirt road, he realized his life had just changed completely. He wasn't just a successful real estate developer looking to expand his business in Springwood. Now he was the protector of a scared child who carried a mystery he was determined to unravel. What Cole didn't know was that, at that exact moment, A man was watching everything from afar, through the tinted window of a black car parked on the corner. Bob Hayes, the city council president, picked up his cell phone and dialed a number. "We have a problem," he said when it was answered. "The developer from back east. He found the girl." Cole's mansion, located in the most exclusive area of Springwood, seemed like a different planet to Libby. The girl watched everything with wide eyes, still clinging to her blue stone, while Martha, the 58-year-old housekeeper, prepared a warm bath and set aside clean clothes she had bought in a hurry at the only store still open at that hour. "I've never seen a child so thin," Martha murmured to Cole, her wrinkled hands trembling with indignation as she helped Libby wash. The marks on the girl's body made her heart ache. She needs food, lots of affection, and a good doctor. While Martha took care of Libby, Cole paced back and forth in his study, trying to organize his thoughts. Mildred's words about powerful people wouldn't leave his head. He needed to act fast, but smartly. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer back east, but only got the answering machine. It was too late. The next morning, Cole woke up to the sound of loud knocking at his door. 2 police officers and a social worker waited outside. Mildred was with them, her face a mask of false concern. "Mr. Miller," began the social worker, Debbie Jenkins, a 42-year-old woman with a severe expression, "we received a serious report of kidnapping. Ms. Mildred is the legal guardian of the girl, Libby." Cole felt his blood run cold. "This woman abuses the child. I saw it with my own eyes. I have the evidence right here. I can show you the marks." "The marks could have been made by you," one of the officers interrupted. "We have a witness who claims you broke into the residence and forcibly took the girl." It was then that Martha appeared on the stairs, holding Libby by the hand. The girl wore new pajamas, printed with colorful flowers, and seemed cleaner and more rested, but her gaze returned to pure terror upon seeing Mildred. "No!" Libby cried, hiding behind Martha. "Please, I don't want to go back." The scene moved even the police officers, who exchanged uncomfortable glances. Debbie, the social worker, approached Libby carefully. "Honey, we need to take you back home." "This isn't her home," Cole protested. "You can't." "Mr. Miller," Debbie interrupted, "you have no legal authority over the child. If you continue to resist, we will have to arrest you for kidnapping." It was at that moment that the doorbell rang again. To everyone's surprise, an elegant woman, around 45 years old, entered without ceremony, carrying a professional camera and a notepad. "Tessa Klein, investigative journalist," she introduced herself, already photographing the scene. "Interesting to find 2 police officers and a social worker removing a clearly terrified child from a safe environment to return her to a supposed guardian with a questionable history." Mildred paled upon recognizing Tessa. The journalist was known for her explosive reports on corruption and abuse of power. "What are you doing here?" Mildred asked, her voice trembling. "Doing my job," Tessa replied with a sharp smile. "And coincidentally, I was just investigating some interesting connections between certain local authorities and a land dispute case. Imagine my surprise to discover that a child was at the center of all this." The police officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the journalist's presence. Debbie, the social worker, seemed confused. "I suggest we all sit down and talk," Tessa proposed. "I have some information that might interest everyone, especially about how a certain guardianship was obtained in a, shall we say, peculiar way." Cole watched amazed, as Tessa's presence completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Mildred, who moments before had been confident, now seemed on the verge of collapse. Libby, still clinging to her blue stone, looked at Tessa with a different expression. For the first time since Cole had met her, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. During the tense conversation that followed in the mansion's living room, Tessa revealed that she had received an anonymous tip about irregularities in guardianship proceedings in the area. "And it's no coincidence," she continued, "that these cases seem to have a connection to disputed land that, curiously, Mr. Bob Hayes has a great interest in acquiring." Upon hearing Bob's name, Mildred let out an involuntary sob. Cole noticed and made a mental note of that information. "I suggest that for now, we leave the girl where she is," Tessa proposed. "While the investigations continue, it's safer for everyone involved. Don't you agree?" The police officers, already visibly uncomfortable with the situation, quickly agreed. Debbie, after examining the documents Tessa presented, also nodded. After everyone left, including a visibly shaken Mildred, Cole turned to Tessa. "How did you know?" "I've been investigating Bob Hayes for months," she replied, her eyes shining with determination. "He's involved in a much bigger scheme than you imagine, Mr. Miller, and this girl, she might be the key to unraveling it all." That night, while Martha tucked Libby into bed, the girl pulled another stone from her pocket, this time an emerald green one. "This is for you," she said to Cole, surprising him. "To protect you." "Protect me from what, honey?" he asked, intrigued. "From the bad men," she replied, her voice just a whisper. "The same ones who took my real mom." Cole and Tessa exchanged meaningful glances. The mystery was much bigger than they imagined, and they knew they needed to act fast. Somewhere in town, dangerous secrets threatened to surface, and a 6-year-old girl, with her collection of colorful stones, seemed to be the only witness to something powerful people desperately wanted to keep buried. The next morning, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon of Springwood, Cole was already in his study, making calls. Tessa's presence had bought them some time, but he knew they needed to act fast. It was then that Martha rushed in, her face worried. "Mr. Cole, the girl is having some kind of episode," she said, wringing her apron in her hands. "She's sitting on the floor of the room, spreading those stones of hers and saying things that don't make sense." In the room, Libby had arranged her stones in a perfect circle. There were dozens of them, of different colors and sizes. In the center, the girl rocked back and forth, murmuring words that seemed to form a song. "Sweet gum blossom, morning smell, come back home, child of the river." Cole and Martha exchanged surprised glances. The song had its own rhythm, as if it were part of some ritual. When Libby noticed their presence, she stopped abruptly. "Who taught you that song, honey?" Cole asked, sitting down on the floor beside her. "Grandma Willow," Libby replied, picking up a red stone and spinning it between her fingers. "She always sang it when she made the cloth dolls." It was the first time Libby had mentioned anyone from her past besides her real mom. Cole made a mental note to investigate that name. At that same moment, on the other side of town, Tessa Klein parked her car in front of a small coffee shop. Inside, a 39-year-old woman, her curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, waited with a cup of strong coffee. "Olivia Reed?" Tessa asked, sitting down. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Olivia was known for her discreet but efficient work as a private investigator, especially in cases involving missing children. "Tell me more about the case," she asked, her sharp eyes studying Tessa. While the journalist explained the situation, Cole's cell phone rang insistently at his mansion. It was his broker back east, informing him that 3 major investors had inexplicably pulled out of projects in Springwood. "I'm sorry, Cole," the broker said. "They mentioned something about unstable business environment in the area." Cole knew exactly what that meant. It was Bob Hayes's first move against him, but something even more concerning was about to happen. Martha ran into the study, her face pale. "Mr. Cole, the police are here again, and there's a court officer with them." This time there were 4 patrol cars. The court officer, a thin man with glasses, held an official document. "Search and seizure warrant," he announced. "The minor Libby must be returned immediately to the custody of her legal guardian." But when the police entered the house, they found only Libby's empty room, with the colorful stones still arranged in a circle on the floor. Cole had also disappeared. What no one knew was that, minutes earlier, Tessa had sent an urgent message: "Get out of there now. Olivia found something. Meet us at the address I'll send." The address led Cole and Libby to a small house on the outskirts of town. Olivia waited for them on the porch, her face tense. "You need to see this," she said, leading them to a room filled with old papers and photos scattered on the walls. "I've been researching all night. The story Mildred tells about being Libby's distant aunt? It's all lies. On the walls, photos of a small settlement that existed near Springwood 5 years ago. In one of the images, a young woman held a baby. The detail that caught everyone's attention: a small crescent-shaped mark on the baby's wrist. Libby, who had been quiet until then, approached the photo and touched the paper with her small fingers. Instinctively, her other hand went to her own wrist, where the same birthmark was visible. "Mommy," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. Olivia continued, "5 years ago, a fire destroyed a large part of the settlement, including all records and documents. Officially, there were no survivors. But something intrigues me. Why would someone go to the trouble of forging documents to give custody of Libby to Mildred?" "Because she's a witness," Tessa replied, the pieces clicking into place in her mind. Even being only 1 year old at the time, Libby was there. And maybe, unconsciously, she can recognize those responsible for what happened. It was then that they heard a noise coming from the kitchen. Everyone froze. Cole protectively placed Libby behind him, while Olivia pulled a small camera from her pocket. From the kitchen door emerged an unexpected figure. A 63-year-old woman, her grey hair tied back in a colorful scarf, carrying a grocery bag. "I knew you'd come back, little sweet gum blossom," the woman said, her eyes fixed on Libby. "I am Willow, the midwife who brought you into the world. And it is time for you to know your true story." Everyone's hearts raced. The answers they were looking for were there, in the form of this old woman, who seemed to carry the weight of long-kept secrets. But before Willow could continue, the sound of approaching sirens made everyone hold their breath. "Back way, quick!" Willow instructed, guiding them to a hidden door behind a bookshelf. "There's a car waiting. Tessa knows where to go." As they fled through the narrow passage, Libby pulled another stone from her pocket, this time a purple one, dark as night. "This one is special," she said. "Grandma Willow gave it to me when I was a baby. She said it would help me remember who I am." The sirens grew louder, and the group ran through the passage that led to an alley behind the house. The mystery of Libby's true identity was beginning to unfold, but with each answer, new dangers arose. And somewhere in town, Bob Hayes received a call that made him slam his fist on the desk in fury. "The old midwife is alive!" Tessa's car wound its way along the dirt roads that cut through the Kansas prairie. In the back seat, Libby slept with her head resting on Cole's lap, her small hands still clutching the purple stone. Olivia, in the passenger seat, typed furiously on her laptop connected to a 4G modem. "I found something," she whispered, so as not to wake the girl. "Old town hall records. In 2020, there was a change in local zoning legislation. The area where the settlement was located was redesignated as a tourist development zone." "Let me guess," Tessa interrupted, her eyes fixed on the dirt road. "Right after the fire?" "Exactly. And there's more. The company that bought the land, Horizon Developments, has a major partner from an offshore in the Cayman Islands. But I managed to track some bank transfers that lead to a familiar name." "Bob Hayes," Cole finished, his voice filled with suppressed anger. The sun was beginning to set when they arrived at a small inn near Prairie Springs, a neighboring town. The owner, Ms. B, a 71-year-old woman with a kind face and hands calloused by work, received them without asking questions, an arrangement previously made by Tessa. "The back room is ready," Ms. B said, guiding them down a hallway decorated with local crafts. "No one will look for you here." While Martha, who had arrived separately to avoid suspicion, helped Libby take a bath, the adults gathered in the small back room of the inn. The ceiling fan spun lazily, stirring the warm Kansas night air. "We need to understand why Mildred was so determined to keep Libby under control," Olivia mused, spreading documents on the rustic wooden table. It was then that they heard Libby's voice, who had escaped from her bath and was standing at the door, dripping wet. She was afraid. "I'd remember." Everyone turned to the girl. "Remember what, honey?" Cole asked gently. "The firemen," Libby replied, her voice trembling. "They wore black masks, but one of them, I saw his face when the mask fell off." The silence that followed was heavy. As lead, Tessa was the first to recover. "Libby, would you be able to recognize that man if you saw him again?" The girl nodded slowly, then ran back to Martha, who was waiting with a towel. "That explains a lot," Olivia said, picking up her phone. "I'll call some contacts in Washington, D.C. We need federal protection." But before she could make the call, Ms. B rushed into the room. There's strange movement on the road, black cars, tinted windows. Cole felt his heart race. How had they been found so quickly? The answer came in the form of an electronic beep. Olivia located a small tracking device hidden under Tessa's car. "We need to split up," Tessa decided quickly. "I'll go by the main road pretending everyone is in the car. You go by the old cowboy trail." "No!" Libby protested, who had returned to the room. "We can't separate. The stones need to stay together." There was something so urgent in her voice that everyone stopped to listen. The girl ran to her backpack and dumped all her stones on the floor. Under the watchful eyes of the adults, she began to arrange them in a specific pattern. "Grandma Willow taught me," she explained, focused on her task. "Each stone is a place. When you put them together the right way, it forms a map." Olivia knelt beside the girl, her professional eyes studying the pattern. "Wait a minute." She picked up her laptop and opened an old map of the region. This is a map of the settlement. The colored stones mark specific points. "The red spot is where they kept the important papers," Libby said, pointing to a red stone. "Mommy showed me once before the bad men came." Tessa was frantically photographing the stone map when headlights lit up the back window. Ms. B peered through the crack in the curtain. 3 cars. They're surrounding the inn. It was then that Cole's cell phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "I know where the girl's real mother is. Meet me tomorrow at the Springwood Cultural Festival. Look for the Sweet Gum Craft booth. Come alone." The developer showed the message to the others. "It could be a trap," Olivia warned. "Or it could be our only chance," Tessa replied, already formulating a plan. "The festival is a public event with thousands of people. It would be the perfect place for a discreet meeting." Libby, who had finished arranging her stones, tugged on Cole's shirt sleeve. "We need to go. The blue stone is glowing." Indeed, the blue stone she held seemed to emit a soft glow in the dim light of the room. Cole knew it was just the reflection of the light from outside, but something in the girl's conviction touched him deeply. "Miss B," he called, "is there really an old cowboy trail?" The old woman smiled, revealing an inner strength that her frail appearance concealed. "Yes, son, there is. And I know exactly how to get you to it without being seen." As the black cars surrounded the inn, no one noticed a small camouflage door in the back chicken coop, nor the group that was silently escaping through the darkness of the prairie, guided by a 71-year-old woman who knew every inch of those lands. Libby, carried in Cole's arms, whispered in his ear, Don't be afraid. The stones will protect us. They always protected our people. In the darkness of the Kansas night, as they walked ancient trails that told centuries-old stories of resistance and survival, Cole began to understand that he had stumbled upon something much bigger than a simple case of abuse. It was the story of a people who refused to be erased, and of a small girl who, even without knowing it, carried the keys to justice. The Springwood Cultural Festival buzzed with colors, sounds, and aromas. Craft booths, local food vendors, and cultural performances spread across the central square, creating a vibrant labyrinth of activities. Cole, dressed discreetly in a simple shirt and hat to blend in with the crowd, walked alone among the people, his eyes sharp, looking for the booth mentioned in the mysterious message. Libby was safe with Martha and Olivia in a location only they knew about, a small farmhouse on the outskirts of town, owned by Ms. B. Tessa, meanwhile, circulated through the festival disguised as a street vendor, her camera hidden in a straw bag. It was then that Cole spotted a booth different from the others. While most displayed vibrant and flashy colors, this one had more subdued tones, with fabrics in deep blue and purple. An old woman with grey hair worked at a manual loom, her hands moving with the precision of decades of experience. "Looking for something specific, mister?" she asked without looking up from her work. Her voice had a familiar tone that made Cole tremble. "Sweet gum?" he ventured, approaching. The old woman finally raised her gaze, and Cole recognized the same wise eyes of Willow, the midwife. "Sit down," she said, indicating a wooden stool. "We have a lot to talk about." Meanwhile, at the farmhouse, Libby played with her stones in the yard, under Martha's watchful eye. The girl seemed calmer there, as if the rural environment reconnected her with old, good memories. "Miss Martha," she suddenly called out, "did you know that each stone has a story?" Martha approached, interested. It was the first time Libby had spoken spontaneously about her collection. "This one here," the girl continued, showing a brown stone with golden veins, "is from the day Mommy taught me how to make cornbread. And this green one—" She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "This is from the last day I saw her." At the festival booth, Sweet Gum had just poured Cole a strong coffee in an agate cup. "You have protected our little one," she said. "Therefore, I will trust you." The old woman opened an antique drawer in her counter and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside were old photographs of the settlement. In one, Cole recognized baby Libby, in the arms of a young, beautiful woman with the same large eyes as the girl. "This is Dawn Wilson, Libby's mother," Sweet Gum explained. "She was our community leader, fighting for the regularization of our land. She was close to succeeding when the fire happened." "And where is she now?" Cole asked, his heart racing. "Washington, D.C., Sweet Gum replied, lowering her voice even further. "Working as an activist under another name. She doesn't know Libby survived, just as Libby doesn't know her mother is alive." The revelation hit Cole like lightning. Before he could process the information, his cell phone vibrated, an urgent message from Olivia. "Trouble. Mildred's disappeared off the grid. No one can find her anywhere." Almost simultaneously, Tessa approached the booth discreetly, feigning interest. "In the crafts, Bob is here at the festival." "With security." Sweet Gum reacted quickly, putting away the photos. "They can't see me with you. Go. Tonight, look for Mother Josephine's place on the outskirts of town. Dawn will be there." Cole had barely moved away when he saw Bob Hayes crossing the square, flanked by two burly men. The city council president seemed tense, his eyes scanning the crowd. Back at the farmhouse, something strange was happening. Libby, who had been playing quietly, began to become agitated. "The stones are—" "What?" she exclaimed, scattering her collection on the dirt ground. "They do that when there's danger." Martha was about to say it was impossible when she heard a noise coming from the back of the property. Olivia, who was keeping watch, signaled everyone to be silent. Footsteps were approaching. At the festival, Cole was trying to blend in with the crowd when he noticed something disturbing. Some of Bob's security guards were carrying the same black masks Libby had described, hidden in their jackets. His phone vibrated again, another message from Olivia. "Urgent, they found us. We need to leave now." Sweet Gum, watching everything from her booth, grabbed a small package from under the loom and discreetly handed it to Tessa, who was passing. "Buy for the girl. She'll know what to do." The festival continued in its colourful and noisy joy, oblivious to the drama unfolding within its depths. Cole found himself divided. Should he run to the farmhouse or head to Mother Josephine's place? The answer came in the form of a distant scream, so familiar it chilled his blood. Libby's voice. At the farmhouse, Martha hugged the girl protectively, while Olivia faced a different Mildred than they knew. No longer the hard and cruel woman, but someone who seemed terrified. "They're going to get me," Mildred cried, her face stained with tears. "You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt her, but they forced me. They have proof against me. They can destroy me." It was then that Libby did something unexpected. She broke free from Martha's arms and walked over to Mildred, carrying her red stone, the same one she always associated with the anger she felt. "I forgive you," the girl said, her small voice filled with ancient wisdom. "Grandma Willow says, forgiveness is stronger than fear." The child's simple gesture seemed to break something inside Mildred. The woman fell to her knees, sobbing, and began to tell everything. About how Bob blackmailed her, about the forged documents, about the real reasons for keeping Libby under control. No one noticed the small recorder that Olivia had left on. In her pocket, recording every word of the confession. Night was approaching, bringing with it the promise of a meeting that could change everything. Somewhere in town, a spiritual center was preparing to receive a mother who thought she had lost her daughter. And in the midst of it all, a small collection of colorful stones continued to tell a story of resistance, love, and survival that refused to be silenced. Mother Josephine's place was located in an old adobe house, its thick white-painted walls gleaming under the moonlight. The scent of fresh herbs and incense hung in the air as Cole, with Libby in his arms, approached the intricately carved wooden gate. Tessa and Olivia followed closely, while Martha stayed at the farmhouse, taking care of a still shaken Mildred. "She's nervous," Tessa whispered, watching how Libby clutched her stone collection against her chest. The girl, who usually organized the stones with almost ritualistic precision, now held them all together, as if fearing they might escape. An older woman with dark skin and hair as white as the moon awaited them at the entrance. Mother Josephine, her 78 years of wisdom etched on every wrinkle of her face, needed no introduction. "Dawn's daughter has returned," she simply said, extending her arms to Libby. The girl, surprisingly, did not hesitate to go to her. It was as if she recognized something familiar, ancestral, in the old woman's embrace. Inside the spiritual center, candles illuminated a circular space where handmade rugs had been laid out. In one corner, a simple altar displayed white and yellow flowers, rose quartz and crystals that closely resembled Libby's stones. "Your mother will arrive shortly," Mother Josephine informed them, sitting in an old rocking chair. "But first, we need to prepare the girl. The reunion needs to be done carefully so as not to wound hearts that have already suffered too much." It was then that Olivia, always alert, noticed movement in the street. "We have company," she murmured, peering through the window. Two black cars parked discreetly a few houses away. "Don't worry," Mother Josephine reassured them, a serene smile on her lips. "They wouldn't dare enter here. This is a sacred place, protected by forces men like Bob Hayes don't understand. Libby, sitting on the rug, began to organize her stones again. This time she formed a different circle. "This is how Mommy did it," she explained, her voice choked with memory, "when we needed protection." The sound of an approaching car made everyone hold their breath. Through the window, they saw a young woman getting out of a taxi. Tessa stifled an exclamation. It was exactly like the photos, just a few years older, with prematurely grey streaks scattering her black hair. Dawn Wilson, 34, a settlement rights activist, had returned to Springwood. Mother Josephine rose with the dignity of a queen. "I will receive her first," she said. "She thinks she's here for a meeting about settlement land. She doesn't know that." A scream interrupted her words. Dawn had just entered, and her eyes instantly found Libby. The girl, still sitting in the circle of stones, raised her face and time seemed to freeze. "It's not possible," Dawn whispered, her legs giving way. "My daughter, my Joanna." "Joanna?" Cole repeated, confused. "Her true name," Mother Josephine explained. "Libby was the name Mildred gave her to hide her identity." Libby, or Joanna, slowly got up, her small hands trembling. One of the stones escaped, rolling to her mother's feet. It was the blue stone, the first one she had shown Cole. "You kept it," Dawn said, bending down to pick up the stone. "All of them. You remembered." "I always remembered, Mommy," the girl replied, her voice now firm and clear. "The stones didn't let me forget." The embrace that followed was like an explosion of light in the spiritual center. Mother Josephine wept openly, her tears leaving silver streaks on her dark cheeks. Cole felt his own heart ache, remembering his own loveless childhood. But the reunion was brutally interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A stone had been thrown through the window, with a message tied to it. "Hand over the girl or everyone will suffer the consequences." Dawn instinctively pulled her daughter behind her, her eyes flashing with an ancient fury. "They won't touch her, not again." It was then that Tessa pulled out her cell phone, a triumphant smile on her face. "I think it's time to use this," she said, pressing play on the recorder. Mildred's voice filled the air, confessing everything. The blackmail, the forged documents, Bob's plan. "That's not all," Olivia added, pulling a folder from her bag. I found the original settlement records. They were hidden at the Prairie Springs courthouse, protected by a clerk who refused to destroy them." Mother Josephine approached the broken window, her imposing figure silhouetted against the moonlight. Outside, Bob's men waited tense. "We have two options," the old woman said, her voice carrying the weight of generations of struggle. "We can face them now, with all the evidence we have, or we can do it their way," Dawn finished, a dangerous glint in her eyes, "using fear and threats." And it was then that Joanna broke free from her mother's embrace and walked to the center of the circle of stones. With surprising precision for a child her age, she began to rearrange the stones into a new pattern. "We don't need to do it their way," she said, her voice sounding strangely mature. "Grandma Willow taught me that the stones show the right path, and look what they are showing now." The pattern forming on the floor was no longer a map. It was something different, something that made Mother Josephine hold her breath in recognition. "The ancient symbol of protection," the old woman murmured, "used by our people for generations when we needed to face injustice without becoming unjust ourselves." Outside, more cars were arriving. The night was just beginning, and Mother Josephine's place was preparing to become the stage for a battle unlike any Springwood had ever witnessed. A battle where colorful stones, ancient secrets, and the love between mother and daughter would prove more powerful than all the threats in the world. Dawn found Mother Josephine's place transformed into an unlikely fortress. Throughout the night, people had arrived silently, old Springwood residents, scattered members of the settlement, community, craftspeople from the cultural festival. Each brought something: food, water, blankets, stories, and most importantly, their presence as witnesses. Bob Hayes, outside with his men, watched the movement with growing concern. What should have been a quick and discreet operation was turning into a public event that was attracting more and more attention. Inside the spiritual center, Joanna slept in Dawn's arms, while Cole, Tessa, and Olivia planned the next steps with Mother Josephine. The recording of Mildred's confession had been sent to various journalists and authorities, but they knew they needed more. "I just received a message from Martha," Olivia whispered, checking her phone. "Mildred wants to cooperate. Completely. She's willing to tell everything, including about the meeting where they planned the fire." "And there's more," Tessa added, spreading documents on the antique wooden table. "I managed to access Horizon Development's bank records. The transfers weren't just to Bob. There's a much larger scheme involving other local politicians and businessmen." It was then that Joanna woke up with a start, her large eyes wide with fear and determination. "Mommy," she called, "I need to show you something, now." The girl ran to her backpack and pulled out a stone that no one had seen before, a black, smooth stone, the size of a coin. "Grandma Willow gave me this on the day of the fire," she explained. "She said to keep it until the right moment." Dawn took the stone with trembling hands. Something was engraved on it, numbers, coordinates. This is where the real documents are," Mother Josephine completed, approaching. "Willow didn't just rely on memory, she kept proof." Outside, the movement was increasing. More cars arrived, but they weren't Bob's men. They were journalists, drawn by anonymous calls about a conflict involving settlement land. Sweet Gum, who had arrived during the night, began distributing coffee and biscuits to everyone. Her wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she served, but her eyes shone with an ancient strength. "Bob won't give up easily," she warned. "He has a lot to lose. The resort they're building on our land has already received millions in investments." It was then that Cole had an idea. He picked up his phone and made a call that surprised everyone. "Hello, Mildred. I need you to come here and bring that rope." Joanna's expression changed at the mention of the rope, but Cole knelt beside her. "Trust me, little one. Sometimes we need to turn our tools of pain into instruments of justice." An hour later, Mildred arrived, escorted by Martha. She carried the dreaded braided rope, her hands trembling. Joanna, seeing her, did not back down. On the contrary, she walked towards her with the dignity of someone much older than her 6 years. "This rope," the girl said, "has the marks of our blood, mine, yours, and everyone Bob hurt." Cole then revealed his plan. With Tessa's help, they organized a makeshift press conference in the spiritual center's yard. Mildred, trembling but determined, stood before the cameras with the rope in her hands and began to speak. She told everything: how Bob had found her working on the farm, how he convinced her to participate in the scheme with promises and then with threats, how she was forced to mistreat Joanna to keep her under control. And then, in a symbolic gesture no one expected, she handed the rope to the girl. Joanna took the rope and, with Sweet Gum's help, began to unravel its knots. Each loosened thread represented a story, a truth that needed to be told. The cameras recorded everything. Meanwhile, Olivia and a trusted group followed the coordinates of the black stone. The indicated location was in the ruins of the old community, under a centuries-old tree that had survived the fire. There, buried in a metal box, was a flash drive and original documents that proved the legal ownership of the land. The morning progressed, and more people arrived at the spiritual center. Local merchants brought food, water, chairs. A network of solidarity formed naturally, as if the entire town was waking up from a long sleep. Bob, seeing his plan crumble, attempted a last desperate act. He ordered his men to invade the spiritual center, but something unexpected happened. His own security guards, touched by Joanna's story and disgusted by the revelations, refused to act. It was then that Dawn asked for silence and began to sing. It was an ancient song in Yoruba that spoke of resistance and renewal. Joanna, recognizing the melody from her deepest memories, joined her mother. Soon, dozens of voices joined the singing. Joanna's colorful stones, arranged in a circle in the center of the spiritual center, seemed to pulsate with a life of their own under the morning sun. Each told a part of the story, not just of the girl and her community, but of everyone who had ever faced injustice and found the strength to resist. And there, in that moment of unlikely unity between such different people, something began to change in Springwood. It wasn't just about a land dispute or the exposure of a corruption scheme. It was about a community rediscovering its voice, its strength, and its ability to unite against injustice. From her balcony, watching the crowd that now filled the entire street, Mother Josephine smiled. Beside her, Joanna arranged her stones in a new pattern, no longer a symbol of protection, but one of transformation. The following week transformed Springwood completely. Mother Josephine's place had become the heart of a movement that was growing organically, bringing together people from all walks of life. The story of Joanna, the girl with the colorful stones, spread by word of mouth, touching hearts and awakening dormant conscience. Cole, who had initially planned to expand his real estate business in the area, found himself at the center of a profound personal transformation. On one particularly significant morning, he gathered his legal team at the spiritual center under the watchful eyes of Dawn and Mother Josephine. "I want to completely redevelop all my projects," he announced, spreading blueprints and documents on the antique wooden table. "We will no longer build luxury condos. We will develop sustainable projects in partnership with local communities." Tessa, who was constantly receiving calls from major news outlets interested in the story, documented every development. "The important thing now," she explained during a meeting with community leaders, "is to ensure that this mobilization doesn't fade away. We need to transform this moment into concrete changes." It was then that Joanna, who was playing with her stones in a corner of the room, suddenly stood up. "Look," she called, pointing to the pattern she had created on the floor. The stones formed a spiral that began with the red stone, the one of anger, and ended with a white stone recently discovered. "It's a map of the future," the girl explained, with that disconcerting wisdom she sometimes displayed. "Grandma Willow said that when we transform anger into something good, everything becomes white again, like a new page." That same day, 3 significant events happened in Springwood. First, Mildred voluntarily surrendered to the FBI, which had taken over the case after the complaints gained national repercussion. Her testimony, which lasted over 6 hours, detailed not only Bob Hayes' scheme, but a network of corruption that extended across several small towns. The second event was the arrival of a group of researchers from the University of Kansas, interested in documenting the history of the settlement community and their traditional techniques of preserving memory through symbols and objects, like Joanna's stones. But it was the third event that truly marked the beginning of a new era. During an impromptu assembly at the Spiritual Center, which gathered over 200 people, Dawn presented a project she had developed during her years of activism in Washington, D.C., a community development plan that combined cultural preservation, environmental sustainability, and income generation. "We don't just want to get our land back," she explained, her firm voice echoing through the hall. "We want to transform it into an example of how a community can thrive without losing its roots." Cole, impressed by the depth of the project, was the first to speak. "I want to put my business experience to work for this dream, not as an owner or leader, but as a partner." While the adults discussed technical and legal details, Joanna continued her silent work with the stones. Now, she taught other children who had joined her, sons and daughters of community members who were starting to return, attracted by the possibility of reconnecting with their origins. "Each stone has a name," she explained patiently, "and each name has a story. When we put all the stories together, it forms a cord of strength that no one can break." Martha, who was watching the scene, noticed something extraordinary. The children, naturally, began to include their own stones in the circle, each bringing a fragment of family memory. It was as if a new type of historical record was being created there, before their eyes. In the evening, when most people had already left, Mother Josephine gathered a small group in the spiritual center's yard. In addition to Cole, Dawn, and Joanna, Tessa, Olivia, Martha, Sweet Gum, and some of the community elders were present. "What we are experiencing," the old woman began, her voice filled with emotion, "is more than a fight for justice. It is a moment of healing, of transformation, and we need to honor this in the right way." She then asked Joanna to fetch her stones. The girl, understanding the solemnity of the moment, organized them into a new pattern, a spiral that opened like a flower. "This is the symbol of renewal," Mother Josephine explained. "Our ancestors used it when a great change was coming, and now we will use it to seal our commitment to the future." One by one, the people present were invited to add something to the circle: a colorful ribbon, a seed, an old photograph. Cole, when it was his turn, surprised everyone by placing the keys to the land he had bought for his original venture in the center of the circle. "This land," he said, "now belongs to the community project. It is my contribution to the new beginning." Dawn, moved, hugged her daughter. Joanna smiled, her eyes shining with a joy that finally seemed appropriate for her age. In her small hands, the white stone, symbol of a new start, gleamed under the moonlight. Outside the spiritual center, the streets of Springwood pulsed with a different energy. In the bars, the squares, the houses, people talked about change, about justice, about the strength that exists when a community unites. And somewhere in town, in a solitary cell, Bob Hayes faced the silence of the night and the weight of his choices. The transformation was just beginning, and as Joanna had said, with the inexplicable wisdom of children, sometimes you have to mess up all the stones to create a new design, more beautiful and more just. Autumn arrived in Springwood, bringing winds of change. 3 months had passed since the events at Mother Josephine's place, and the town breathed a different air. The land of the former settlement community, now legally recognized, began to show the first signs of rebirth. Where before there were only ashes from the arson fire, community gardens and beds of medicinal herbs were now sprouting. On one particularly significant morning, Joanna woke up earlier than usual. The girl, who now lived with Dawn in a simple but welcoming house on the outskirts of the reconstructed community, had a special sparkle in her eyes. It was the day they would begin the construction of the Settlement Cultural Center, a project born from an unlikely collaboration between Cole and local leaders. "Mommy!" she called, entering Dawn's room with her colorful stones in her hands. "Today is the day to use the pink stone." Dawn smiled, still amazed at how her daughter associated colors and moments. The pink stone, she had learned, represented happy new beginnings in Joanna's particular symbolism. At the construction site, an unusual scene was unfolding. Cole, dressed in simple work clothes, talked animatedly with local construction masters and community artisans. The Cultural Center project had been developed jointly, blending modern, sustainable construction techniques with traditional settlement knowledge. "Every brick of this building," he explained to Tessa, who continued documenting everything, "will tell a story. We are using traditional adobe, but with an improved technique I learned from old man Jim, a master artisan from the community. Tessa, who had become a constant presence in the region, smiled as she adjusted her camera. Who would have thought that the developer who came to build luxury condos would end up becoming a champion of vernacular architecture? Cole's transformation indeed surprised many, but no one was more impressed than Martha, his former housekeeper, who now coordinated a professional training project for women in the community. "You know," she commented to Olivia as they watched Joanna play with other children on the grounds, "sometimes I think that girl didn't just save herself. She saved all of us from who we were becoming." Olivia, who had decided to establish a permanent office in Springwood after the events of the past few months, agreed silently. Her work now focused on helping other traditional communities in the region document their histories and fight for their rights. The morning progressed, and with it an unexpected group arrived at the site. They were representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office, accompanied by university researchers and journalists from different parts of the country. The Springwood case had become a case study on cultural resistance and social transformation. "It's impressive," commented one of the researchers, Dr. Clara Johnson, as she watched Joanna organize her stones into a new pattern on the packed dirt ground. "The way this community uses natural elements to preserve its memory is unique. Each of these stones is a living archive of history, but it wasn't just academics who were interested in the story. Mildred, who after collaborating with the investigations had begun a rehabilitation process, arrived discreetly at the site. Her hands trembled as she carried a small box. "Joanna," she called softly, still unsure how she would be received. The girl, surprisingly, showed no fear. On the contrary, she approached with curiosity. "I found this among my things," Mildred said, opening the box. Inside was an old yellowed photograph and a small dark blue stone. "It was your mother's, from the day she won an award in school for a paper about the community's history." Dawn, who was watching the scene closely, felt tears well up in her eyes as she recognized the photograph. In it, a younger version of herself smiled proudly, holding a certificate. The dark blue stone had been her lucky charm that day. "You kept this all this time?" she asked Mildred, her voice choked. "I couldn't throw it away," Mildred replied, wiping her own eyes. Maybe a part of me always knew I was on the wrong side of history." Joanna took the dark blue stone and, without hesitation, added it to the pattern she was creating on the ground. Immediately, the design seemed to gain a new dimension, as if a missing piece of a puzzle had finally found its place. "Now, yes," the girl said, satisfied, "the circle is complete." Mother Josephine, who had arrived silently and was observing everything, smiled in approval. "This is how healing happens," she murmured. "One stone at a time, one story at a time, until all the broken circles are made whole. Again." The scene was interrupted by the sound of music coming from the main road. A group of young people from the community, led by Sweet Gum, approached playing drums and singing traditional songs. It was the beginning of the groundbreaking ceremony for the cultural center. "Come, everyone," Sweet Gum called, her voice strong despite her age. "Today is not a day to stand around watching. It's a day to join our forces." One by one, everyone approached the center of the grounds, where a circular structure had been marked on the ground. There, following Joanna's instructions, who seemed to know exactly where each element should go, they began to place objects significant to the community: old photographs, recovered documents, traditional tools, and, of course, colorful stones. Cole, observing the movement, realized that something extraordinary was happening. It wasn't just a building that was being founded there, but a new kind of relationship between people, stories, and places. In his pocket, the green stone that Joanna had given him months ago for protection felt heavier, more significant. And so, under the Kansas prairie sun, as voices mingled in ancient and new songs, a page of Springwood's history began to be rewritten, not with ink and paper, but with colorful stones, smiles regained, and hearts in the process of healing. Winter arrived in Springwood, bringing dense morning fog and starry nights. 6 months had passed since the start of the cultural center's construction, and the transformation was visible not only in the physical buildings, but especially in the people. The case had become a landmark in the town's history, attracting national attention and inspiring other communities to fight for their rights. On one of those cold mornings, Joanna surprised everyone with an unusual request during breakfast at the house she shared with Dawn. "I want to visit Mildred," she said, as she arranged her stones on the kitchen table. "I have a gift for her." Dawn exchanged worried glances with Cole, who had stopped by for coffee before an important meeting. Mildred, after collaborating with the investigations and undergoing a period of psychological counseling, was living on a small farmhouse on the outskirts of town where she cultivated medicinal herbs. "Are you sure, my flower?" Dawn asked, sitting beside her daughter. "Yes," Joanna replied with that disconcerting certainty she sometimes displayed. "The stones told me it's time." That afternoon, after much discussion among the adults, a small group headed to Mildred's farmhouse. In addition to Joanna, Dawn, and Cole, Mother Josephine, who insisted on accompanying what she called a moment of healing, and Tessa, who continued to document the story's developments, also went. Mildred received them in the yard, where she maintained an impressive garden of aromatic and medicinal herbs. Her face, previously always tense and bitter, now showed a new serenity, though still marked by traces of guilt and regret. "I brought this for you," Joanna said, extending a small cloth bundle to Mildred. Inside were 3 stones, a red one, the same one she always associated with anger, a grey one, and a white one. "The red one is for you to remember," the girl explained, her voice soft but firm. "The grey one is to help you forgive, and the white one is for a new start." Mildred held the stones with trembling hands, tears silently streaming down her face. "I don't deserve." "It's not about deserving," Mother Josephine interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of ancestral wisdom. "It's about healing. And healing is not something we deserve or not. It's something we need." Meanwhile, in town, a silent revolution continued. The cultural center, now with its adobe walls already erected, had become a hub of cultural and educational activities. Martha coordinated traditional craft workshops, where community women taught ancient weaving and pottery techniques. Olivia, who had transformed her office into a historical documentation center, constantly received visitors interested in learning about the settlement community's memory recovery process. Joanna's stones had inspired a larger project. Each family now kept its own collection of memory objects, creating a living archive of stories and traditions. "It's amazing how a child taught us so much about cultural preservation," she commented to Tessa, as they organized a photographic exhibition about the community's transformation. At Mildred's farmhouse, the meeting took an unexpected turn. Joanna's former guardian, after a moment of hesitation, led the group to a room in the back of the house. There, to everyone's surprise, was a small altar with candles and old photographs of the community. "I started putting this together after I got out," she explained, her voice choked. "Each photo, each object. It's a way of remembering the harm I caused and the good I need to do to make up for it." Among the photographs, there was one that caught Dawn's special attention. It showed her mother, already deceased, teaching a group of children how to make cornbread. The image had been taken a few days before the fire. "That photo," Dawn whispered. "We thought they had all been destroyed in the fire." Bob ordered everything burned, Mildred confirmed. But I couldn't. Some things you keep even knowing. You shouldn't. Joanna, who was watching everything attentively, approached the altar and carefully began to arrange her stones in a new pattern around the photographs. The design that formed resembled the roots of a tree. This is how memory works, she explained, surprising everyone with her articulation. Like roots. Some go deep, others stay on the surface, but they are all connected. Cole, who had remained silent until then, felt something change within him. The last resistances, the last fears about his new role in that community seemed to dissolve before the simple wisdom of that child. "You know," he said, addressing everyone but looking especially at Joanna, "when I came to Springwood, I thought I knew everything about building things, but you taught me that the most important constructions are invisible." The afternoon was progressing when Mother Josephine suggested a closing ritual. In the center of Mildred's herb garden under a rue plant, everyone sat in a circle. The elder lit an incense of herbs and began to chant an ancient song in Yoruba. Joanna naturally joined the singing. Her childlike voice mingled with Mother Josephine's, creating a harmony that seemed to cradle the very air. One by one, people joined in, even without knowing the lyrics. On the horizon, the sun was beginning to set, painting the prairie sky with shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in town, the bells of the main church rang, mixing with the voices singing in Mildred's garden. "Tomorrow," Joanna announced when the singing ended, "I will teach other children how to read the stones, because now it's not just my story anymore. It's everyone's story." And so, as night gently fell over Springwood, a new chapter began to be written. Not in official books or dusty documents, but in the hearts of people who, through the wisdom of a child, had learned that true justice begins with forgiveness, and that memory, when preserved with love, can build bridges over the deepest abysses of the past. Spring exploded in colors over Springwood, bringing with it a renewing energy. The settlement cultural center, now practically finished, stood out in the landscape not only for its unique architecture, which blended traditional techniques with modern sustainability, but mainly for the life that pulsed within it. On Saturday mornings, the place became a meeting point where old and new stories intertwined like the threads of a large tapestry. On this particular Saturday, something special was about to happen. Joanna, now almost 7 years old, was preparing for her first official lesson as a guardian of the stones, as the community had affectionately nicknamed her. In the central courtyard of the cultural center, small, colorful mats, made by local artisans, formed a large circle where about 15 children waited eagerly. "Each stone has a voice," Joanna began, her small but firm voice echoing in the space. "And when we learn to listen, they tell stories that books sometimes forget." Dawn, watching from afar with a smile on her lips, could barely believe the transformation of her daughter. The frightened girl who lived under Mildred's rule had become a small leader, capable of transmitting ancestral wisdom in a way that even adults stopped to listen. "It's extraordinary," commented Dr. Clara Johnson, the researcher who had permanently moved to Springwood to document the community's cultural recovery process. The way she naturally incorporated pedagogical methods that we normally take years to develop in academia. Cole, who had arrived early to attend the inaugural lesson, noticed something interesting. Among the children present were not only members of the settlement community, but also children of local merchants, farmers from the region, and even the granddaughter of one of the councilmen who previously supported Bob Hayes. "The real transformation," whispered Mother Josephine, who seemed to have the gift of reading thoughts, "happens when the barriers between us and them begin to disappear." In the center of the circle, Joanna led her class with a unique methodology. Each child had brought a stone from home, following the instructions sent the previous week. Now, one by one, they shared the stories behind their choices. "This stone is from my grandma's yard," explained Michael, a 5-year-old boy, son of a local merchant. "She said it's been in the family since Springwood was just a small settlement." "And do you know why she kept that stone?" Joanna asked, her eyes shining with genuine interest. "Because my great-grandfather used it to mark the place where he planted the first seeds of each harvest," Michael replied, proud. Tessa, who continued to document everything, noticed something significant happening. "They're not just sharing objects," she commented to Olivia. "They're weaving a new narrative for the town, where all stories have value." The morning progressed, and with it, the stories multiplied. One girl brought a stone found during the construction of the first school in town. Another boy shared a pebble his grandfather kept since the inauguration of the bridge over the Clear Creek. Each stone carried a fragment of Springwood's collective memory. It was then that something unexpected happened. An elegant woman, whom everyone recognized as Bob Hayes' wife, approached the circle timidly, holding the hand of her 6-year-old daughter, Anna. A tense silence fell over the group, but Joanna, demonstrating surprising maturity, smiled and signaled for the girl to join the circle. I brought this," Anna said, pulling out of her pocket not a stone, but a small purple crystal. "My mom gave it to me. She said it's time to do things differently." Dawn, who had initially tensed up at the sight of Bob's wife, felt her heart soften. There was living proof that change was possible, that wounds could heal, that new paths could be built. At the end of the morning, when the children were already dispersing with their parents, Joanna gathered all the shared stones into a large circle in the center of the courtyard. Beside each one, she placed one of her own colorful stones. "Now they are friends," she explained to the adults who watched curiously. "And when stones make friends, people do too." Martha, who had watched everything while organizing the children's snack, couldn't hold back her tears. "You know," she said to Cole, "when you came here wanting to build luxury condos, I thought you were just another businessman thinking about profit. But look what you helped build. Something much bigger than buildings." The developer smiled, touching the green stone he always carried in his pocket, his first gift from Joanna. "Actually," he replied, "they rebuilt me." In the afternoon, as the sun began its descent on the prairie horizon, a small celebration spontaneously formed in the cultural center's courtyard. Sweet Gum brought her guitar, other community elders showed up with traditional snacks, and soon the space was filled with music, food, and conversation. Joanna, sitting between Dawn and Cole, watched everything with shining eyes. Suddenly, she got up and ran to her backpack, returning with a stone no one had seen before. A multicolored stone, with veins of different shades that intertwined like a mineral rainbow. "I found it this morning before I came," the girl explained. "I think it was born like this, mixed, to teach us that that's how we should be too." Mother Josephine, hearing this, closed her eyes and smiled. In her many years of life, she had learned that sometimes the deepest wisdom comes from the youngest mouths, and that the true healing of a community begins when it learns to embrace all its colors, all its stories, all its stones. Summer arrived in Springwood with unusual intensity, but not even the scorching heat slowed the pace of activities at the Settlement Cultural Center. The adobe walls, painted with natural pigments in earthy tones, kept the interior pleasantly cool, as if the building itself breathed in harmony with the people who frequented it. On that specific morning, a different kind of hustle and bustle filled the place. It was the day of the official inauguration of the community library, a space that went far beyond traditional books. There, in addition to shelves filled with works on African American history and culture, something unique had been created, the Stone Memorial. Joanna had spent the entire week helping to organize the space, carefully arranging not only her own collection of stones, but also the contributions that arrived from the entire community. Each stone now had its place on special shelves, accompanied by a small plaque telling its story. "Look," she explained to a group of visitors, pointing to a reddish-brown stone. "This one came from the place where my great-grandmother planted her first cornbread plant when she arrived here. And that one over there," she indicated a grey stone with white spots, "is from where they held the first blues circle in the community." Dawn watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and awe. In less than a year, Joanna had transformed from a frightened girl into a true guardian of the collective memory. Her unique method of historical preservation through stones had inspired a movement that was now spreading to other communities in the region. "It's impressive," commented Dr. Clara Johnson to Tessa as they made the final adjustments to the photographic exhibition documenting the community's transformation. "What started as a way for a child to deal with her trauma has turned into an innovative methodology for cultural preservation." Cole, who had arrived early for the final inauguration preparations, noticed something interesting. On the library walls, among the photographs and historical documents, special niches had been created where small, colorful stones mingled with local artwork, creating a unique visual narrative. "It was Joanna's idea," explained Martha, who now coordinated not only the craft workshops but also a heritage education program. She said that stories need to be told in many ways so that everyone can understand. The morning progressed and more people arrived for the inauguration. Among the guests was Mildred, who in recent months had dedicated herself to a silent but significant work, the cultivation of a medicinal herb garden in the back of the cultural center, where she taught the knowledge she had inherited from her own grandmother. "Plants also tell stories," she said to Joanna, who had approached her with a new stone in hand. "Just like your stones." The girl smiled, understanding perfectly. "That's why I brought this one for you," she replied, handing Mildred a light green stone with small, shiny dots. "It reminds me of your herbs when the sun hits them in the morning." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a surprise visit. Miss Bay, the woman who had helped them on that crucial night of escape, was accompanied by a group of artisans from her region. Each brought a contribution to the stone memorial. Not just stones, but stories that intertwined with the community's narrative. "Stories are like rivers," Miss Beer said, her voice filled with wisdom. "They may seem separate, but deep down, all the waters meet." The highlight of the morning, however, was yet to come. Mother Josephine, who had spent the past few days in mysterious preparations, gathered everyone in the central courtyard. There, to general surprise, an impressive installation had been set up, a large map of the settlement territory, made entirely of stones of different colors and textures. "This is not just a map of land," the elder explained, her voice reaching all corners of the courtyard. "It is a map of resistance, of memory, of life." Joanna, naturally, was the first to approach the map. With the precision of someone who intimately knows the power of symbols, she began to identify each region, each important landmark in the community's history. "Here," she pointed to a set of blue stones, "is where the creek curved that my mother always talks about. And here," she indicated a formation of red and ochre stones, "is where the country dances happened before the fire." It was then that Olivia, who had been discreetly observing everything, made an announcement that caused a stir. Her documentation work had resulted in an invitation for the Stone Memorial experience to be presented at an important international congress on cultural heritage. "But it won't be us, adults, who will present," she explained, smiling. Joanna herself was invited to explain her method. The news was met with an explosion of joy and pride. Dawn hugged her daughter, silent tears streaming down her face. Cole, moved, took the first stone he had received from Joanna out of his pocket and carefully placed it on the map near the location where the cultural center was now built. To mark the beginning of the change, he explained, his voice choked. The celebration continued throughout the afternoon, naturally turning into a community party. Sweet gum and other elders brought traditional foods. Local musicians joined spontaneously, and soon the cultural center courtyard vibrated with energy of renewal and hope. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie sky with shades of pink and orange, Joanna climbed onto a small stool to make an announcement. In her hands, she held a stone unlike any other, one that seemed to contain all the colors of the rainbow when light passed through it. "This stone," she said, her voice small but firm, "is special. Grandma Willow taught me that when we find a stone like this, we need to share it with everyone, because it's not just a stone, it's a promise." "What kind of promise, my flower?" Dawn asked, curious. "The promise that we can always start over," Joanna replied, her eyes shining with ancient wisdom. "And that when we bring all the colors, all the stories, all the memories together, we become stronger." At that moment, as twilight embraced Springwood with its golden light, something more than a simple inauguration was happening. It was the birth of a new way of telling stories, of preserving memories, of building bridges between past and future. And at the center of it all, a small girl who had transformed her pain into wisdom, her stones into living history. Preparations for the international presentation of the Stone Memorial mobilized the entire community of Springwood. The big day was approaching, and the Settlement Cultural Center buzzed with a special energy. Joanna, now almost 7 years old, rehearsed her presentation daily, using a unique method that blended storytelling with the careful arrangement of her stones. "Each stone is like a word in a living book," she explained to Dr. Clara Johnson, who was helping her prepare the presentation. "But they speak not just with the mouth, they speak with the heart too." The news of a Brazilian child's participation in an international congress on cultural heritage had attracted the attention of national media. Journalists began to arrive in Springwood, each wanting to tell the story of the girl who transformed stones into a revolutionary method of memory preservation. Dawn watched everything with a mixture of pride and maternal concern. "Sometimes I wonder if it's not too much responsibility for someone so small," she confided to Mother Josephine during a particularly busy afternoon. The elder smiled, her eyes shining with ancestral wisdom. "Children are like seeds, Dawn. Some need a lot of water to grow. Others blossom even in the driest soil. Your daughter is like those prairie flowers that bloom after a fire. Stronger. Because of the difficulties she faced, the impact of Joanna's work was already being felt far beyond the borders of Springwood. Other traditional communities in the United States began to adapt her method, creating their own registration systems based on natural elements significant to their cultures. "It's extraordinary," Tessa commented to Olivia as they documented a meeting where representatives from different communities shared their experiences. What started as a child's way of keeping her memories is turning into a national movement for cultural preservation. Cole, who had completely redirected his investments to sustainable development projects in partnership with traditional communities, noticed a profound change not only in the region, but in himself. "You know," he said to Martha during a quiet moment, "before I measured success in numbers, in profits. Now I understand that true wealth lies in the stories we build together." The former housekeeper, who now coordinated a professional training program for community women, nodded understandingly. "You learned the most important lesson, that sometimes we need to lose everything we thought was important to find what's truly worthwhile." As the travel day approached, something unexpected began to happen. People from all over Springwood, not just from the settlement community, began to bring their own stones to add to the memorial. "It's as if the whole town is discovering its voice," observed Sweet Gum, as she helped organize the new contributions. "Each stone that arrives brings a different story, but they are all part of the same web." One afternoon, while organizing the last stones received, Joanna made a surprising discovery. Among the donations was a small, intricately carved wooden box with a note, "To the guardian of the stones," from someone who learned the importance of preserving memories. Inside the box was a single stone, black as night, with a golden vein cutting through the middle. The note was signed by Anna, Bob Hayes's daughter. "This stone," the girl explained when she visited the memorial the next day, "my dad kept in his drawer. He said he found it the day he decided to build big things in Springwood. Now he's different. He said it belongs more to you than to him." The news that Bob Hayes, even indirectly, had contributed to the memorial caused a stir in the community. Mildred, who was present when Anna handed over the stone, felt something transform in her heart. "Sometimes," she said to Mother Josephine, "forgiveness comes in ways we don't expect." On the eve of the trip, a special celebration was organized at the Cultural Center. The central courtyard was decorated with colorful ribbons and lanterns, and each participant was invited to bring a stone that represented their wish for the community's future. Joanna, dressed in a new dress sewn by Sweet Gum from traditional fabrics, led a simple but deeply significant ceremony. One by one, people placed their stones, forming a large spiral in the center of the courtyard. "Each turn of the spiral," she explained, her clear voice reaching everyone present, "is like a year passing, and each stone is a promise we make for the future." Dawn, watching her daughter with tear-filled eyes, realized that something extraordinary had happened throughout that year. It wasn't just Joanna who had been transformed. It was the entire community, the entire town. The night progressed, with music, food, and stories being shared. In a particularly touching moment, Mother Josephine asked for silence and began to chant an ancient song in Yoruba. Other voices joined in, creating a harmony that seemed to cradle the prairie itself. Under the starry sky of Springwood, as voices rose in song and the colorful stones glowed in the lantern light, something magical hung in the air. It was as if each stone, each story, each person present was part of a large living mosaic, telling a story of transformation, resistance, and hope. And at the center of it all, a small girl who had transformed her pain into wisdom held a multicolored stone, the same one she had found at the beginning of her journey. But now she was no longer alone. Around her, hundreds of other stones told stories of healing, of new beginnings, of a future that was being built one memory at a time. The large auditorium in Chicago was packed for the International Congress on Cultural Heritage. Representatives from various countries eagerly awaited the presentation that had intrigued everyone, an innovative methodology for cultural preservation developed by a child from rural Kansas. Joanna, in her colorful cotton dress made by Sweet Gum, took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage. Beside her, a long table was covered with a traditional settlement fabric, where her stones would be arranged. In the front row, Dawn held Cole's hand, both nervous and proud. Mother Josephine, who had insisted on traveling despite her advanced age, smiled serenely. "My name is Joanna," she began, her small but firm voice echoing through the microphone. "And I came to tell a story that began with pain, but turned into something much bigger." One by one, she began to place her stones on the table, creating a pattern that went far beyond simple organization. It was a living, colorful, pulsating narrative. Each stone placed was accompanied by a story, a memory, a lesson. In the audience, Cultural preservation specialists from around the world watched fascinated as a 7-year-old girl revolutionized academic concepts with the simple and profound wisdom of someone who had learned to transform trauma into healing. The stones, she explained, are like the heart of the earth. They hold stories not just in their colors or shapes, but in the way we choose to tell through them. The presentation, which was supposed to last 20 minutes, extended for almost an hour, with the audience completely captivated. When Joanna finished placing her last stone, the multicolored one that symbolized unity, the auditorium erupted in emotional applause. But the real surprise was yet to come. During the question and answer session, an elderly woman stood up. She was a famous American anthropologist, known for her work with traditional communities around the world. "Miss," she said, visibly moved, "in 50 years of research, I have never seen a method so simple and at the same time so profound for cultural preservation. You didn't just create a methodology. You taught us that true wisdom has no age." The impact was immediate. Representatives from traditional communities in various countries approached after the presentation, each wanting to learn more about the stone method. Tessa, who documented everything, could barely keep up with the interview requests that poured in. Back in Springwood, a week later, the entire community gathered at the cultural center to celebrate. The space, which had already transformed so much, now gained a new dimension. It would be the headquarters of a pilot heritage education project, funded by an international foundation impressed with Joanna's work. During the celebration, something extraordinary happened. Mildred, who in recent months had dedicated herself to working with medicinal herbs, approached Joanna with a special gift. A small stone garden where each natural element told a story of healing. "I learned from you," she said, tears in her eyes, "that sometimes we need to unearth the heaviest stones from our hearts to be able to plant new flowers." Mildred's transformation was just one of the many silent miracles that had happened in Springwood. The cultural center had become a hub of not only cultural but also social and economic renewal. Cole, following the example of transformation, had established a foundation dedicated to supporting similar projects in other communities. "You know what impresses me most?" Olivia commented to Dawn as they watched Joanna teaching other children to read the stones. "How a story that began with so much suffering could generate so much good." Dawn smiled, watching her daughter. "It's because she understood something that many adults take a lifetime to learn, that our wounds can become bridges." The sun was beginning to set when Mother Josephine gathered everyone in the central courtyard for a special moment. In the center of the space, Joanna had created her most impressive installation yet. A large map of the United States made entirely of colorful stones. "This map," the girl explained, "is different from the others. Each stone represents a community that is learning to tell its own story. And look how much space there is for so many more." It was then that an unexpected visit arrived at the cultural center. Anna, Bob Hayes' daughter, came accompanied by her mother and other children. From town, each brought a stone and a story to share. "My dad taught me," Anna said, her voice trembling a little, "that sometimes you have to be brave enough to admit your mistakes and try to do things differently." Night fell over Springwood, but the cultural center remained alive, pulsating. In the courtyard, under the prairie stars, people of different origins, ages, and stories gathered to share memories, dreams, and hopes. Joanna, sitting between her mother and Cole, watched everything with that serene wisdom that characterized her. In her hands, she spun her first stone, the blue one she had shown Cole on that fateful day that seemed so distant now. "You know," she said, her voice soft but clear, "in the beginning I collected stones because I was afraid to forget. Now I collect them because I learned that remembering is a form of love. Mother Josephine, hearing this, began to chant an ancient song. Other voices joined in, creating a harmony that seemed to cradle the prairie itself. The colorful stones, arranged in their meaningful patterns, glowed under the moonlight like silent guardians of a story that would continue to be told. And so, under the starry sky of Springwood, a story that began with a frightened girl and her colorful stones transformed into a movement of renewal, hope, and living memory. It was no longer just the story of Joanna or the settlement community or even Springwood. It was a story of transformation that, like the stones themselves, would continue to touch and transform lives for generations. "And now?" someone asked. Joanna smiled, picking up a new stone from her collection, one that no one had seen before, with colors that seemed to change with the light. "Now," she replied, "it's time to start new stories, because the stones never stop telling, and we never stop learning to listen."